Irene Miller. Thank you for inviting me to be with you. I know that you understand pain. I am sure that in each of your lives has been a lot of pain. But I just want you to know that you are not the only ones. That pain exists in many places in the world. And I am here to tell you of mine. I was born in Warsaw, the capital of Poland. When the Germans attacked Poland, I was about 6 years old, but I remember very well many of the incidents. When the Nazis attacked Poland, the army was not able to defend itself for very long, but Warsaw itself was under siege for about 4 weeks. Day and night, bombs were falling. Being on the top floor of an apartment building, it was the most dangerous place because the bombs were falling through the roofs, through the ceiling, into the apartments. We lived on the top floor of an apartment building, and that was the most dangerous place to be. So with the cooperation of family friends, we moved into their apartment on the second floor. It was my parents, my sister 5 years older than myself, and I. But even there it wasn't safe, because one night a bomb fell into the apartment, exploded in flames, blocking the door. The only way out was through the window. My father, who was a very tall man, knocked out the window, and he said we have to quickly jump to follow him before the whole apartment gets engulfed in fires. When my turn came and I looked down, I was standing on the windowsill. I looked down. It seemed so far down, I was scared. I just froze in fear and couldn't move. My mother pushed me out the window, and somehow my father didn't catch me, and I fell on a pile of glass, cutting my arms and legs. And when the whole family was down, my mother picked me up and carried me to a bomb shelter, and there she was kind of picking out the shards of glass out of my arms. My parents felt that as Jews, and also political activists, they were liberal people, that they would be among the first ones to be persecuted by the Nazis. Sometimes during that winter, 1939-40, my parents sold the lease to our apartment, hired a Polish guide to smuggle us across the border into the Soviet Union, because the Germans had not been then yet in the Soviet Union. To smuggle us because the borders had been closed. The Soviet would not allow anyone to enter. I remember the last leg of that journey. At some point, this guide stopped. It was a secluded area surrounded by trees, and he said that we had crossed the border, and in this direction, take the train in the morning to the city where we were headed, called Białystok. We huddled up in our clothing for the remainder of the night. But when we got up in the morning and walked out of the area, we saw a field with people laying on the snow in their clothing, huddled up, close together people, leaning against suitcases, bags. The man did not take us across the border. He left us on the no man's land. And for those of you who don't know what's a no man's land, it's a territory between two countries. It doesn't belong neither to one nor to the other. My mother kept on saying, move, don't stay in one place, move, because if you stay in one place, you'll be much colder. I moved and moved around, found some other children, a little older than I, but we tried to spend time, tried to improvise some whatever games we could without having anything. But at times, I would get so cold that I couldn't move anymore, and I would crawl in my clothing under the covers. Eventually my feet got frostbitten and I had open wounds and was unable to wear my shoes. And my mother tore some garment and wrapped my feet in it, and I was shuffling in my dad's extra pair of shoes. The only food we had is that which the peasant women from nearby villages would come after sundown and sell it and charge exorbitant prices. But there was no other place where we could buy anything else to eat, so people had to do it. The only fluid to drink we had is melting snow. There were people making fires. It was a wooded area. People were making fires to melt the snow, but also to warm themselves. I remember two incidents from the no man's land vividly. One is, I woke up one night and there was a man next to me under the covers. I tried to push him out, but apparently I fell asleep. And when I woke up in the morning, the man was dead. People were dying from diseases, maybe from starvation, from exposure into the open sky laying in wintertime. Another incident, I was standing with my mom, trying to warm myself by a fire, and a young woman approached holding a bundle in her arms. She had a baby wrapped up in a blanket, and people assumed that she wants to warm herself and the infant, and they kind of parted way and let her approach the fire. But as she got close, a man looked into her arms and said, "Lady, your baby doesn't need warming anymore." The baby was dead. He took it out of the woman's arms. She did not resist, did not oppose. And he started walking towards where the Russian soldiers were protecting the border. And all the people who were around the fire followed him, forming a procession. He laid the baby in front of one of the guards, and the people started crying, shouting, let us in, we are going to die one by one. And that guard didn't blink an eye, just kicked that baby wrapped up back into the crowd. Like all the others, it was buried. The women were now bringing not just bread for sale, but shovels, and the young men would bury the dead in shallow graves. My father bribed a Soviet official to give him a letter allowing his family to cross the border. I assumed the letter was in Russian. My father didn't know Russian, and I assumed it was sealed. Anyway, when he handed it over to the Soviet guard, it says that he may take his children, but said nothing about my mother. And my parents decided that my father should take my sister and myself to safety and see thereafter what he can do to bring my mom. After being for 6 weeks in the no man's land in the winter under open skies, to sleep on a wooden floor with a roof over our heads was a luxury. The Nazis came, took all the people, put them on trains in the direction to Poland and Germany, that's the same direction. My mother with them. When my dad came back telling us that my mom was no longer on no man's land, it was an awful feeling for a 6-year-old girl to think that she will never again see her mother. But totally unexpectedly, one day my mother walked in. I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. Well, we were happy. It didn't matter we slept on the floor, it didn't matter it was crowded. We were happy. We were together and we were not hungry because my father found some kind of a work in the city. He was commuting and he was earning enough so that we could eat. But that didn't last for very long. We started hearing that the Russians were coming in the middle of the night, taking away the young men, and no one knew what happened to them. One day there was a rumor that our community was scheduled for such a raid, and my mother took the train to the city to warn my dad not to come back until he hears from her. But she missed the last train coming back. And that night, when both of our parents were gone, Soviet soldiers kicked in the door of the cabin. They said we had a few minutes time to scoop up our belongings and we had to stand in front of the doors. They marched us to a train station. There was a long line of cattle cars, and they would shove in as many people as they could in each of those cattle cars. And my sister and I screamed and cried that we are not going to go without our parents, we are not going to go without our parents. And those Soviet soldiers tried to convince us that our parents will meet us at the next station, but we were unwilling. When the platform was almost empty of people, we saw from a distance a truck, a small truck, and on it our parents. They somehow found out of what was going on and found a way of getting to us. As we ended up, and again it was not a choice. I assume that once you decided you go south, the Soviets would send you to one location or another, but you had no choice where you go. We ended up in a very poor farming village, without land and without any possibility of getting a job and earning some money. My father would go from farmer to farmer, from household to household, asking for work in exchange of some food. He would do anything in exchange for some food. Once in a while, he would get a day's work, but most of the time, not. There were periods of time that we lived on boiled grass and leaves. My mother would go into the field, pick up a bunch of leaves and grass and boil it. And she would drink it first herself to see if it isn't poisonous. If she didn't get sick, she would give it to us. There were some organizations, some groups of people, whenever I say some, I don't know exactly who they were, that concerned that the children would not survive the starvations. They opened orphanages for Jewish children, but would take in not just orphans, but Jewish children for Poland. One day, a man came to talk to our parents. The next day he showed up with a horse and buggy. My mother told us that we'll go to a place where we'll be with other children, that we will have food to eat, and maybe we'll have a school to go to, and our parents, will visit as often as possible. I don't remember whether I even resisted whatever going. I think my mother told us to go, and we went. And we went with that man on his horse or on the buggy for hours driving, until we ended up in another village where the orphanage was housed. The orphanage was basically one large room. From one end on the wall to the other, boards had been ripped off the floor and stacked up on piles of bricks, and girls were laying tight one next to the other, covered with military blankets, and their heads totally shaved bald. I came with long braids. Those who will get my book will see what I looked like then. A few months after I entered the orphanage, my father died. There was an epidemic of dysentery. The village in which they lived had no pharmacy, no physician. My mother was told that in another village there was some medical facility or whatever. She walked the whole night. I don't know whether she got the penicillin that my father needed or not, but when she came back, my dad was dead, buried in a communal grave. My mother didn't even know in which one. I think there was a period of time that I must have looked like we see the pictures of the starving children in Biafra. Skinny legs, skinny arms, and big bellies. And the big bellies are not from food, but from malnutrition. But you know, all that time, when I was so hungry, I never thought of myself, poor me. I never thought of myself, why is it so that I am hungry? And why is it so that maybe others have food? Never. Those around me were hungry too. I don't know if that helped, or somehow I never felt bad for myself. I had all kinds of dreams of what life would be. And I always was very hungry for education. I don't know where it came from, but always hungry to know things. I didn't complain, but what I did, I wrote poetry. And in the poetry, I would express my longing for a normal life, my longing for living with how it is to live with parents in your own home, and how it is not to be hungry. I never cried, I never complained, but it was all there in writing. I am on the board of directors of the oldest civil rights organization called the American Jewish Committee. And I do everything I can to make sure that everyone is treated with respect. To me personally, it doesn't matter what's your religion, it doesn't matter what's the color of your skin, it doesn't matter how much education you have or where you came from. If you are a good human being, that's all that matters. And that's what civil rights is, that everyone is entitled to the same privileges. Doesn't matter where they came from.